Sacred and Political Geography. Today's evening, we all have joined through Google Meet. This is a great occasion to welcome our chief guest of today's webinar. On behalf of History Department, on behalf of my own, I welcome our chief guest, Dr. Oliver Chiron, Professor in History and Geography, Department of Religion and Himalayan Civilization, Bordwaux, Montaigne University, France, who will deliver a special lecture on the sacred landscape of Sikkim, elements of religious history, sacred and political geography. We are grateful to him for accepting our invitation and becoming a chief guest of today's webinar. He published 13 articles in international journal. Also, he attended and published as many as number of articles in seminar, conferences, and he also chaired many conferences, and he was a visiting fellow at the Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies at Kolkata. And I welcome our head of the department, Professor Dr. K. Sankari, who is an inspiration of many, as the accomplishment she has made are not an easy task. She has dedicated her past 24 years to the betterment of our students' career. She has ensured that the students get all the facilities that would help them grow in better people. I welcome our head of the department, Madam Dr. K. Sankari, and I welcome all the research scholars and participants and my fellow teachers, Dr. J. Muthukumar, Associate Professor of History, and Dr. K. M. SUBRAMANIAM, Assistant Professor of History, and other staff members are an epitome of compassion, and we are quite sure you will be perplexed by their sagacity. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Yes, namaste. I am Dr. Chiron from Bordwaux University, and today I will present the sacred landscape of Sikkim, elements of religious history, sacred and political geography. So I share the window to show you my. Yes. So the landscape of, so I am a geographer. My specialization is human and cultural geography. I use historical sources to explain the dimension of state mandala and history of Sikkim. I speak also different language, Tibetan, Nepali, and Hindi, but not yet Tamil language. I'm sorry. But this presentation is also based on the publication in the Tibet Journal in 2020 with two other fellows, Samuel Teros and Carlo Baki Data. And I use also the book of Mavali Rajan and Binay Barman, Contours of Culture, India and Beyond. So the first part of my presentation is on the origin and the formation of the Buddhist hidden land of Sikkim, some elements of geography and history. Origin, we have different origin. First, I used in my sources, I use the Tibetan text and English sources, and also translation from Tibetan to English. The second part of this presentation, I will show the context of the formation of a sacred landscape of Tibetan origin, Buddhicization, Tibetanization, and the names of the place. Then I develop and approach the idea of mandala in the second part and state mandala within the structuration of this agrarian landscape. Then finally, I will prove the importance of the inheritance of this pure patrimony and the conservation and transmission of this heritage. I will also show that, yes, In the third part, we also wish to explore the sacred geography and circular space of Sikkim. In fact, the mobility of pilgrims and tourists during their religious journey around the recent construction of big statues sanctuarize the sacred landscape into religious park and attempt to give a modern representation of the sacred landscape. This is a circular model correlated also with the notion of mandala. So the Sikkim state is a very small state in India with 7,000 square kilometers and with 679,000 population. The state of Sikkim has a low density with 88 inhabitants per square kilometers, a majority of Hindu population, with an important minority of Buddhist population. The founder of the kingdom of Sikkim are Buddhists, are the Bhotias, the Lepchas, and other Tibetan or Tibeto-Burmese tribes, with a minority of Muslim population, 1.6, and an important minority of Christian population, 9.5. And it is important also in the representations to take account of this part of the Christian population. The main language is the Nepali language with 70%. Sikkim is a fully organic state since 2016-2017. And so you can see here the map of Sikkim and the field ground. My field ground is mainly situated in the west of Sikkim. So the first part, here the relation between sacred culture and religion is placed at the very center of this representation. I'm particularly interested to analyze the connections between nature, beliefs, and culture among the populations of Himalayas in Hinduism and Buddhism, especially around Kichupari Lake, which is located in the west of Sikkim. And now I will show you the context of Tibetanization and the origin of this sacred landscape. The origin of this sacred landscape and the sources, the English sources, translated from Tibetan sources. Very recently, the Royal History of Sikkim, a Chronicle House of Namgyal, published by Sir India and Annamalai, Pierre Sorensen, and John Ardousi, is under the point of view of the Majesty, the Queen of Bhutan, Kesang Chodon Wangchuk. It's the original and Tibetan version of the Royal History of Sikkim, first published in 1909 by Tudop Namgyal and Yeshe Dolma, translated by Kassi Dawa Sando. The English version, translated and annotated with no colonial views, transmitted to the next generation of Sikkimese, no colonial bias, is an important document for the Sikkimese population. But my scientific information used in this presentation are mostly took and extracted from the fieldwork and bibliography. Sikkim has a different history compared to the South Indian history. You can hear me? Yes. You can hear? But there are different periods, yes. Mainly the royal period of the history of Sikkim is very close to the dynasty of Namgyal, and the history of Sikkim started, mainly the royal history started in 1642 with the enthronement of the king of Sikkim, the king Punchok Namgyal, at Norbogang in the west of Sikkim. Guru Rinpoche in Sikkim premises the hidden land. with some sacred Tibetan texts like the Denjong Neyig or the Tashi Ding Neyig, written by treasures discoverer like Rigzin Godemshen. This is the sacred literature, and Padmasambhava, considered like the second Buddha, born in a lotus in the Swat Valley in Pakistan, has indicated the places where the famous Tibetan treasures, the Terma, will be placed. And it is written in the Tashidi Neying or Denjong Neying. This sacred literature is very popular among the Sikkimese and Tibetan population, but not really among the rest of the population. And these places are sanctified by Guru Rinpoche and will be preserved for the next generations. Other Tibetan prophecies are forged by oral traditions and recorded in epic cycles of Latsun Tsempo and Rigzin Godemshen, like the, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Professor.
Like the, yes, okay, good. Like the, in the Rigzin Godrup Terma, this is a mandala of the practices of Vidyadhara, used in Sikkim, also in the sacred text. The triangle, like the Yantra mandala, a very old tantra, present also in Hinduism. This mandala from Dongsar Monastery in Bhutan is revealed by Latsun Tsempo. The practice of Vidyadhara is the famous spirits from air with magical power. These prophecies are important, and of course, there are the Tibetan sources translated in English with the revised history, the Royal History of Sikkim, recently wrote by Dr. Balichi, Dr. Ardouzi, and Dr. Pierre Sorensen. Basically, I use also some translation from the Bulletin of Tibetology, the Namgyal Institute of Tibetology, and the Royal History of Sikkim dramatically tell us the story of how, over the following centuries, their country survived pressure from more powerful states on all sides. Many places are also related with the war between the Bhutanese, the Nepalese, the Tibet, on the borders of the British Empire and Sikkim. The Royal History of Sikkim describes meetings between lamas and princely figures, ministers, delegation with British colonial administrative representative, like the first political officers. At this time, the British are trying to counterbalance the Russians and Chinese in Tibet. Chumbi Valley is a very important axis. Chumbi Valley is located to the east of Sikkim, near Bhutan and Tibet. But mainly the landscape of Sikkim is Tibetanized with the Buddhicization of the place. This is a typical slide from the Lepcha village in the west of Sikkim. In the west of Sikkim, before Tibetanization, there was shamanism and other beliefs. And the history of Sikkim is also a question of collaboration between the population of Sikkim, the Limbus to the left side of the photography, the Lepchas in the center of the photography, and the Botiyas on the right of the photography. This is the three main ethnic groups of Sikkim: Botiya, Lepcha, and Limbu. We call this in Tibetan Lo Men Tsong Tsum. Tsum means tree. The royal dynasty of Sikkim is also very well represented in the iconographic style in the monasteries And on paintings, wall painting, this is Latun Tsenpo and King Punchok Namgyal represented here. In such Sikkimese context, there is a process of Buddhicization over the centering of indigenous perspective and places names. However, in this village, there is a juxtaposition in the rural landscape of pre-Buddhist elements and Buddhist elements intermingled, the god of the soil or territory in the shamanic and Buddhist territorial village. The Lepcha priests are named Bomting in Sikkim, but further we will explain that later the Buddhicization of places and the spread of Buddhism imposed by the Bhotia population exerts a control on the landscape. There is a spatial distribution of the religious elements in the landscape. In this Tibetanization and Buddhization of the landscape, the sacred places are fully marked by some stupas or chöten. There is a sacred text, the Nyeshul, that draw a cartography with a symbol of vertical mandala. There is not only Buddhist place in Sikkim, but there is also Nepalese place with a Sanskritization of the agriculture. The use of plough, terraced fields, agrarian equipments, Hindi and Sanskrit language, like the Devanagari alphabet, the presence of Hindu temples. Firstly, it is important to take notice of that the sacred landscape is not static in time nor space in our discussion of socio-spatial evolution over a long term. Tibetan religion is also well diffused in the north of Sikkim, in the monasteries of Lachen, Lachung, Tolung, where we found the relics of sacred saints of Buddhism, like Latsun Tsenpo, and today there is more Nepalization of the landscape, where we used to use the Nepali language, and some places are Nepalese. But I would like to show now the presence of a model, a cosmogram, the mandala, present in the landscape. This model of mandala represents the sacred geography also of Sikkim. In the Ketchupari village, a cosmological in mandala combining lakes, mountains, and clan is located in a pilgrimage and touristic area. I can show you the place. Yes, nature, culture, and religion are intermingled in Sikkim, where the mountains are the gods, mainly the gods of Buddhism during the 17th, 18th, and 19th century, before the Nepalization of the landscape, and the Lepchas communities are living in the west of Sikkim, especially here in Ketchupari Lake. This is the Ketchupari Lake, a mandala landscape of the sacred, wish-fulfilling lake of Sikkim. The lake of Sikkim is the footprint of a Buddhist divinity, like a Guru Rinpoche, but also Taradolma. And Ketchara is a sacred word, a sacred mudra in the Kagyupa lineage, associating mountain and lake. This is also the pure land of a Dakini, the Dakini Vajra Yogini, linked to this lineage of Kagyupa. The picture was taken.
Excuse me,
Yes,
sir. Sir, are you changing the slides?
yes,
But
yes.
we are not able to see the change of slides, sir.
You can see the next slide now.
No, sir. We are seeing only Lepachas villages. That's images only. That's
Oh, okay. Okay, and now can you see? Okay, now you can see.
right, sir. Now I can see. Now we can see, sir.
Yes. This is the Ketchupari Lake in the west of Sikkim, where pilgrimage and religious tourism are very important. not only attached to pilgrimage, but also to some touristic and nature practice that I will show in the third part of my presentation. Ketchara is the Pure Land of Vajrayogini. This is a mandala and cosmological model attached to the traditions of the Kagyopa lineage, the oral transmission, the school of the oral transmission. We can also link this Ketchara zone, Ketchepari, to a Montaigne and Mandala palace linked to the Anuttara Yoga Tantra traditions. It was also shown in Tibet with Tony Huber, a famous Tibetologist, in 1993 in his thesis work. Ketchara is the Pure Land of Vajrayogini, and now I would like to introduce to the concept of mandala. So, what is mandala? Mandala helps to localize sacred space and to define the sacred places. It marks also the limit of what is sacred and what is not sacred. Yes. Can you see the picture? Yes. This is a mandala, the mandala. Yes, can you see the picture?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, this is the Kalachakra mandala, a very famous palace of the divinity Kalachakra, the rule of the time, the Kala and Chakra. In the center of the mandala, we can see the divinity. Originally, the mandala represents the home of a specific meditational deity positioned in the very center. It symbolizes the residential domain of divine residence, and the center represents purity in its highest form, said Lund. It was also applied in geography, in sacred geography, to the territory and to the religious territory, and to the architecture of Hindu and Buddhist temples. There is the presence of sacred cycles, which are not exactly mandala, but mandala stone graved in mantra, like the Om Mani Padme Hum, or these other mandala. Om Mani Padme Hum. The making of a mandala is very precise. Yes. We found sacred cycle everywhere in Sikkim. First, to draw a mandala, we have to take the proportions of the diagram by drawing on the table in chalk or pencil. It is the plot of the mandala. Then the monks spend a lot of time pouring colors on the sides in small containers, and also keep a scarf on their mouth to protect themselves and respect living beings and even microbes. The mandala is with the chiapu that we can see on the diapositive, on the photograph. The chiapu is a metal dagger that is used to pour colors and thus fill the gaps on the drawing. When ribbing the instrument, the powder is poured with a pen. The mandala is intemporal. It does not, the duration is restrictive. This is the intemporality of the phenomenon. I found also a very interesting mandala in Ladakh this summer. This is the mandala palace of Buya Samaja in Nikir Monastery, belonging to Gelugpa School in Ladakh. The mandala palace is very beautiful on this diapositive. There is also natural mandala. In the making of the mandala, some Rinpoche, like Samdong Rinpoche from Dharamsala, use natural materials like seeds, sandal, wood, clay, and saffron, or bronze on 4 levels and 4 continents on a crown pedestal with different levels of offerings. We have to cleanse our soul by reciting mantras and remove those negativities. The mandala, so the interpretation into the map is different. It questions the relations between the cosmogram of mandala, between the the religious elements placed in the landscape and the interpretation that we can make in geography, from the reality to the model and to the imaginized mandala. If you look at the sacred map of Sikkim, you can see the different monasteries on this map belonging to different schools at the same altitude mainly. And you can see also the different caves to the north, to the east, to the north, Larinifuk, to the east, Deshenfuk, to the south, Kamdosanfuk, and to the east, to the west, Sharshopalfuk. Inside this matrix, the main monasteries sanctified by Guru Rinpoche. Inside this matrix, yes. In fact, the religious map of Sikkim is the sacred map of the monasteries. It is significant to note that Sikkim has a circular space corresponding to a circular geography, with its 4 sacred caves, encircling the sacred map of treasures. The main religious landscape elements are monasteries, sacred lake, stupas, caves, and mountains. From a real to ideal, on religious territory, we look to find the diagram of mandala with a circular pattern. We have different places in Sikkim, very sacred, like Yuksan, localized on this map here. We have the big monasteries who are the center of the faith, and with a presence also of cult, of iconography of the Saint of Sikkim or Guru Rinpoche. We have Tashiding here, the center of the mandala, of the represented mandala, also imaginized, but present in the sacred text of Sikkim, like the Yamda mandala, or Dedu mandala, or Kunchek mandala. There's not only Ketchupari to be a center of mandala, but also J.R. Shuba in 1999 mentioned the presence, according to the sacred text of Terton Sheram, he mentioned the presence of the Kanita or Kanika Shtupa. Kanita Shtupa is a model of natural represented Shtupa shaped like a vast pagoda, according to the guidebook of Terton Sheram. The summit of these Shtupas is the Mount Ganchenzonga. The peaks, it looks like peaks like a crown and a throne. And you can see also the different symbolical appellation of this sacred place, like Pema Yangtze, the peak of lotus happiness, like the peak of the supreme seat, and Larinifuk, the treasure of the Amitayus Tantra, to the east of the sacred landscape of Sikkim. A pagoda is vertical and visualized according to the sacred vision in the sacred text in the landscape according to geomantic configuration. Kanika is similar to Kanishka Shtupa, it seems, but I didn't find the term Kanika or Kanishka, but I found the term Kanita in the book of J.R. Shuba. But in Ladakh, there is also the presence of Kanishka Shtupa related to the period who preceded Buddhism attached to the Kanishka emperor, like in Sani village. For Ladakis, said Quentin Devers, Kanishka was probably the most famous ruler from the pre-Tibetan area, and his name is probably to be understood as eponymous for whatever happened before Sanskar came under Tibetan rule. So maybe the Kanita Shtupa cited by J.R. Shuba, present in the text of Terton Sheram, wrote in 14,000, precedes what in 1400 precedes the period of royal dynasty of Nangal in Sikkim. But Kanita is not automatically Kanishka or Kanika Stupa. Stupas are very present on the soil of Sikkim, like in Gangtok with the Dodrul Choton, but also present in Ketchupari Lake with the Vajrakila Stupas. Vajrakila here. On the top of Ketchupari, we find the noble mountain of Garuda, located at more than 1,900 meters. The Yoksam area is also the altar of the circular and vertical mandala, transposed into the imagination from the real to the interpretation of the mandala, but it seems like a circular model with a divinity at the center, like a mandala palace, also correlated to the different Tibetan texts. Some very important elements of this structuration into a mandala is also the conception of state mandala. I think you will be interested by these conceptions more attached to history. The concept of state mandala was popularized by many authors such as Wolters in History, Culture and Region in Southeast Asian Perspective, published in 1999, and developed by some historians like Chotin Taranon in 1990, in the segmentary state. In his book, World Conqueror and World Renouncer, Tambia described the mandala state with the Manjata and Manjapat Nima. Wolters also in 1982 spoke about the state mandala, and they all evoke the presence of spatial models similar to the state mandala in South Asian territories, like Michel Boulnoux in 2006-2014. The mandala structure found in the socio-political organization of the landscape of Sikkim is close to a hierarchical model with galactic figures expressed in a geopolitical dimension of the sacred landscape. The state's mandala are also the heritage of an Indian or Buddhist model, Indian and Hindu civilization for the famous Otar Coedes, who published in 1964 an interesting book about this. Other mind, there is also Chotin Taranan, who deals with the notion of segmentary state, the segmentary state in South India history. In his historiography of South India, he shows a network of centers of loyalties as opposed to a centralized state characterized by fixed territories and coercive power in South Indian civilization. But most of these, mostly I use for Sikkim spatial model to map cosmogram like mandala when we look the spatial distribution of religious elements placed in the landscape. It questions the relation between the spatial representations and the map beyond the simple elements like the monasteries placed in the sacred landscape of Sikkim. This is the mandala interpretation. And there is also a new landscape, a remodeled or recomposed landscape in the sacred geography of Sikkim. Of course, this mandala is propagated by the cult of iconography with the sacred image of Buddhist image of the saint into the monasteries. But the pilgrims and the mandalization is also occurs today with the modern representation of the sacred landscape, pilgrim circumambulation, and the stake of religious tourism around and in front the big statues of Sikkim. These big statues are very imposant and important, like the Guru Rinpoche statue in Sandrupse, built in 2006, 2007. And the statues of Sikkim are reflecting also some interesting and important points. We think that geographical sites are elevated to a sacred status by pilgrimage circumambulation, practices that serve to pay homage to divinities such as Shiva for Solofok near Namche in Sikkim, Tara, Guru Rinpoche in Sandrupse, or Buddha in Buddha Park at Ravangla. The giga statues are mainly built outside the temples, and compared to Ladakh, the statues are mainly built and present into the temples. There is few statues outside the temples in Ladakh compared to the statues inside the temples. But in Sikkim, this is the opposite. But now there is more statues outside the temples, with the big statue of Chenrezi in Peling, and the pilgrims make donation prayers and go in front of Padmasambhava statues. And the touristic and pilgrimage mobilities in Sikkim are transformed by the development of tourism and sanctuarize this sacred site. We try to understand the mandala as a circular movement and the pilgrimage as a synonym of mobility. It is true to say that around site considered sacred, that it comes to see it as a religious migration of spiritual and ritualized travel from the mandala cosmogram to the ritualized travel of a pilgrim around the sacred site of Sikkim, a kind of circular or mandalic conception. But these conceptions of Buddhism are not shared by all the people. We have asked to some Hindu priests or Hindu tourists if they understand the conception of mandala. Some of them knows very well, because Hinduism and Buddhism have tiny links also. And there is also a Hindu priest along the lake of Ketchupari. We can purify and bless pilgrims and tourists passing through, or advise them for prayers and about the sacred history of the places. Sikkim is not only a Buddhist landscape called Beyul Demojon, but this is also the Dharmadoka, the sacred landscape of Hindu, Nepalese, and Indian population. But the main statue in Sikkim are Buddhist, like the garden park of Buddha, with the Tathagata Tsal in Buddha Park, localized in Ravangla in West Sikkim. It is also, if you look, the organization of shrubs and garden, a circular conception, and the pilgrims are going slowly to the statue to do their donations or circumambulation, and they pray, they prostrate also. The prosternation are very important there. There is an important place of accommodation in the tourist system for a small local population, where tourist circulations are mainly those of Indian tourists visiting the place in family, with sometimes elderly or younger people. The money collected at the entrance with touristic circulation is used to rebuild heritage. Local populations prefer to keep their identity alive and reject sometimes Indianness and some aspects of Indian culture that are different from their own for the local populations. But when we make figure there, we meet the different people, the woman and the female and the male gender. But for example, when a family travels to Sikkim, it will force the researcher to interview towards the male gender more easily, because he's the father and head of the family. Women did not always answer. He served as the first resource person. So Sandrupse is also on the way to the pilgrimage towards the statue. The pilgrims recited the mantras Om Vajraguru Pema Siddhihum, dedicated to Avalokiteshvara. Religious geography expresses itself through music, which is full of light and beautiful sonorities that create their own sound landscape, reminding the presence of Padmasambhava in the sacred landscape of Sikkim. So I go now to the other conceptions. We are not only Buddhist, but also Hindu, like the Chardam of Sikkim in Solofok, a modern Hindu spiritual park with the 4 sacred temples of India, of Bharat Mata, reproduced here in this spiritual theme park. This is exactly a Kum pilgrimage center with the conquest of the four corners of the four directions, similar maybe to the conception of Digvijaya, used by Ashoka. I found also this conception very interesting to connected me to the circumambulations and pilgrimage path. The spiritual theme park of Solofok is also a model of entertainment and therefore is not restricted to classical religious functions like in the Buddhist model of the stupa, but in that case reduced to a touristic model of leisure and pilgrimage park. On the soil of Sikkim, we note the flourishing development of Hinduism in the pattern of conquering mandala. It can be understood as a conquest of the territory revealed by the presence of the temples at the four corners, and this particular architecture is a means of giving reality to the Hinduist cult in Sikkim, thanks to mandalization of the Sikkim state and space by Hinduism, which does mean the mandalization. It proves that the Divijkaya is not only attached to a Buddhist conception, but also to the Rama conquest. In that case, in Solofok, Buddhism is supplanted by the raw territorialization of Hinduism in a non-Hindu landscape. Pratesh is located at the entrance of the park and Shiva at the other extremity, towering above the area, but working as symbolical markers of the sacred complex. There is accommodations in this place for the tourists. There is a vegetarian restaurant, and it is accommodated also to religious tourism and not only to pilgrimage, despite it is also a very important pilgrimage places. A bigger quantity of tourism and pilgrims can stay in the area thanks to the important accommodation and capacity of the hotel. This statue has a mostly budget than the Sandrupse statue localized in Namchi, in the south of Sikkim. So the sacred Hindu territory is recreated in Sikkim in a state which has a Buddhist origin and majority of Hindu population, and which, according to the circular pattern, is better adapted to man pilgrimage or religious tourism, but has also a vertical dimension with the statue of Shiva, and not only circular. We note also the pradakshina, the rectangular, and not only circular disposition of the pilgrimage path and the vertical statue. This dimension is important to understand in order to better preserve the sacred heritage. And now I will introduce the fourth and final part of this presentation, the preservation of the sacred heritage of Sikkim and the issue of conservation of tourism. Rituals preserves the purity of the sacred landscape. A very important point to consider in this presentation is the notion of pollution, the purity of the landscape, because maintaining the purity of the treasures set down by the legatee Sambhava is the guarantee of the preservation of the harmony of this sacred landscape. The monks' prayers and rituals help to maintain the peace and the health of the landscape, with the purpose being to protect human populations, animals, and plants in the whole nature of Sikkim. There is a kind of syncretism in nature, in the beliefs, with the natural beliefs of Sikkimese populations, and religion is also placed at the very center of this representation, with the shamanic practice and also the Buddhist practice. The Tantra is also attached to the conception of mandala, but very present in the Hindu conception, and the meditation practices of Lamaic like a Theatrum Mundum with Vajra, Mahakala, sonority of the trumpet, the Radong soundscapes, are supposed to enhance the purity of the seat. It provides a protective balance as a result of mantras, chanting, and rituals by the local Lepchas Lamas of the surrounding villages of Ketchupari, located in the west of Sikkim. According to what I observed and heard from my guide on the field round, a Nepalese Pradhan, the day after the earthquake of September 2011, he put incense in the lake as well as Hindu offerings in order to protect himself and his family from a new earthquake in Darjeeling, where he had to go back. So, in the landscape of Sikkim, everything is not permissible. There is local institutions who regulate this access to the sacred landscape. And the Christian or Lepcha communities don't believe in certain aspects of religious Buddhist sphere. Mainly, they can't integrate all the notions of purity. They are not in the system all the time of the Tantra or Mandala, but they can go to visit sacred Buddhist site not for practice mainly, but for leisure also, and to rediscover their own heritage, their own sacred landscape. The Buddhist Lepchas adopted some forms of their former religion and vice versa. The Lepcha narrative conception proves the power of Guru Rinpoche and push him for the Buddhist population as a state hero, becoming a hero. But the syncretism of religions with Christian Lepcha is not well accepted by Buddhists. Not all the time, it depends. And there is a majority of Hindu population in Sikkim, 70%, and Nepalese population, with migrants, laborers, unemployment, Islam Puri, people from Bihar, from Assam, and other places. So the migration of the population in Sikkim is also an important component to understand the transformation of the landscape. But the local populations of Sikkim, the Botiyans, are very attached to the conservation of their heritage, mainly the monasteries and the cult celebrated into the monasteries, especially the Botiya tribes, who are more concerned with the Ganchen Zonga, the sacred mountain of Sikkim, than any other ethnic groups in Sikkim. They celebrate and constantly perform rituals in the monasteries, transforming them as regular actors as well as cultural conservators of the Buddhist culture. They are the guardians of their monasteries. Their sacred landscape is preserved by their institution, maintained by ceremonies. And for the Lepcha community, they are very close to their environment. During the building of the dams in Sikkim, they protest with the strike hungers, and the issue of their ancestral ethnic heritage implies a defense of their identity and led us to understand how this ethnic side is very important, especially who is Sikkimese in Sikkim and who is not Sikkimese. The Sikkimese are mainly from Tibetan origin, the Lepchas and Botiyans, but to be Sikkimese is a question of land ownership. And if you possess the land from many generations, you are also considered as a Sikkimese. If you don't possess the land, like some Nepalese, you are not considered as a real Sikkimese. Before, the Sikkimese Lepchas and Botiyas have some protection of their land, but Nepalese representations takes a very important part today in the transformation of the landscape, especially politically. The division of the Sikkim population into Sikkimese, Botiyas, and Lepcha and Nepalese was institutionalized between 1950 and 1979. In 1979, it was the reservation of seats for each category in the Royal Council. There is also the Sikkim subjugation rules in in 1961, who gives some preference for the attribution of the term Sikkimese and for the land ownership to the real Sikkimese. The Nepalese artists are also very present in Sikkim, and they have some association, and they show their emotion through the prism of their painting. They want to show that it's necessary to think about the world in order to be altruistic, to think positive, to reveal the vulnerabilities of each other, especially during the COVID-19. So to conclude, the richness of the Buddhist philosophy reflects the diversity of the environmental landscape and the spatial model of mandala according to its multiplicity. This model is used to localize the center of the sacred, but it is also an indication of the diversity of the sacred. The royal history of Sikkim is highly celebrated and hierarchically distributed, and for many Sikkimese, but the big statue will testify for several centuries to the place of religion in the architecture of this landscape. And similarly, the recent building of big statues in India, in order to attract tourists for religious tourism and pilgrimage, have changed the traditional landscape in remodeling the traditional to modernize landscape marketing under a developed and liberalist state, more liberalist than before. But discussing these ideas with Indian heritage is important to share because this heritage is mainly protected by the Indian government. But what could be the opinion also of the foreign researchers about this fabulous and diverse heritage of India, especially concerned by the Sikkimese minorities in Sikkim? So faced with these new realities, Sikkim is gradually moving from its ideal nature, popularized towards Tibetan and sacred literature, like in the sacred text, to a more concrete and contemporaneized nature. So the use of the mandala is also very useful to understand this sacred nature. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Oliver Chiron. So before giving their vote of thanks, I would request all the participants who have joined to click on to the feedback form and give their feedback. So this is a series of international webinar series which is being organized by the Department of History, Annamalai University. At this outset, I would like to record my sincere thanks to Dr. Oliver Chiron from Bordwaux University for giving a wonderful lecture on the sacred landscape of Sikkim, elements of religious history, sacred and political geography. Dr. Oliver had a brief narration about the sacred landscape and its sacredness in Sikkim, which was the lost territory that was officially annexed with the Indian nation, and the need for the preservation of the heritage landscape, and its how does this heritage landscape has an influence on the socio-cultural life of the Sikkim people. So at the end, I would like to record my sincere thanks to the head of the department, my fellow faculty members, and all the participants, PhD scholars, learned professors, and other participants who have joined this international webinar series. Kindly click on to the feedback form and give your valuable feedback. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Oliver on behalf of the department and also on behalf of the university. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much to invite me, and especially Professor Sankari from Annamalai University, and PhD student Rashid Mansoor, and also Mavali Rajan from Shantiniketan Vishwabharati University, and of course Binay Barman, my colleague from Saldia College in Bangkok. Thank you. So you would like, for answering, I can't read the but I understand your question. So the participation of the societies to the sacred landscape of Sikkim by the local populations is important because yes, they share the sacred landscape by readings on the sacred landscape, by also yes, thank you. By also visiting the sacred places, but not only for pilgrimage, but also for leisure, for rediscovering their landscape and to appreciate the beauty of the views also. And they share also the food also that they can enjoy in Penang, for example. Penang is considered like the little Darjeeling in Sikkim and is very famous for its the point of view panorama. And here there is the building of the new statue Chen Rezi, and the integration of the sacred landscape into the culture of Sikkim is also diffused by the recent writings of Dr. Annamalai and Pierre Sorensen and Dr. John Ardousi in the Royal History of Sikkim, recently published, who have the colonial views, but a view on the sacred history and royal family of Sikkim. And that is possible to share with the population of Sikkim, but by also these recent writings.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
If you have other questions, feel free to ask me. Yes.
Thank you, sir. We can end the session. Thank you.
Yes.